I'm about to show you some data that suggests that smoking marijuana reduces the consumption of alcohol. But before I do that, I want to take a minute for us to realize how weird that finding is, because the observational data is incredibly clear. Cannabis use disorder, problematic cannabis use, and alcohol use disorder are incredibly comorbid conditions. 60% of people with cannabis use disorder, in fact, have alcohol use disorder as well. People who smoke pot are more likely to drink alcohol, and people who drink alcohol are more likely to smoke pot. So how do we get from that set of facts to a randomized trial which demonstrates that marijuana use inhibits alcohol intake? Well, it's a tale as old as statistics class, I guess. Correlation isn't causation. Marijuana and alcohol are used frequently together. They go hand in hand, you might say, but we can conceptualize a few different reasons why this might be. One mechanism, perhaps the two drugs are complementary to each other. Using more of one leads to using more of the other. Alcohol use clearly increases risk-taking behavior and decreases inhibitions, for example, and that might promote smoking cannabis, which might further increase cravings for alcohol. But that's not the only possibility. It could be that these drugs go together because the type of person who uses one is the type of person who uses another. This is a phenotypic argument. Some people are less risk-averse or more thrill-seeking or use these agents to self-medicate or just, party types. In that context, you might expect alcohol, marijuana, and even other drugs to tend to run in the same circles, and it doesn't mean that one causes the use of the other. They're simply correlated. In fact, it's possible to have a correlation like that even when one drug substitutes for another. The substitution model suggests that individuals' goal may simply be to get high or get altered or chill out or whatever, and the particular agent that gets them there doesn't matter. In that framework, though both drugs might be used together, the use of one might suppress the use of the other. And it's incredibly difficult to untie all these factors, but I absolutely love the way researchers, led by Dr. Jane Metrick of Brown University, attempted it in this study. Sometimes the best way to figure out complex biosocial phenomena is to eliminate as many variables as possible, and that's what they did in this randomized trial of 157 individuals who were all frequent consumers of alcohol and smokers of marijuana. Here's the experimental setup. On 3 separate occasions, in random order, the participant was brought into the lab and asked to smoke what they were told was a marijuana cigarette. 1 week, the cigarette contained 7.2% THC. That's about half of what you get from a dispensary joint these days, by the way. 1 week, the cigarette had 3.1% THC, and 1 week it was a placebo cigarette with virtually no THC at all. Lest you worry that these doses were not enough to move the needle, the participants clearly felt the effects, both subjectively, as you can see here in these graphs demonstrating an increased feeling of both happiness and anxiety, classic, and objectively, as you can see in this graph of heart rate. Here's where it gets interesting. After smoking, the participants were brought into the bar lab for 2 hours. Slight jealousy here. My lab has a wet bench, but that's it. Anyway, in the bar lab, the participants were shown images of their preferred alcohol to induce some craving and offered up to 8 small drinks. There was a catch, though. For each drink they abstained from, they would get $3 at the end of the experiment. The authors hypothesized that higher doses of THC would increase alcohol craving and consumption under the complementarity hypothesis. In other words, when you're high, you're going to drink more. But what they found was pretty much the exact opposite. Smoking pot had basically no effect on subjective alcohol craving. Craving went up a bit after the participants were shown pictures of booze, but that was similar regardless of which marijuana cigarette they had smoked. But where the rubber meets the road is in how many drinks they had. Those who smoked the placebo cigarette had, on average, around 3 of those mini drinks over the 2-hour time in the lab. The low-dose THC group had 2.4 drinks, and the high-dose group had 2.1 drinks. This was not only statistically significant, there's a nice suggestion of a dose-response effect here, and the direction of effect is exactly counter to what the authors hypothesized. Far from more marijuana leading to more drinking, more marijuana suppressed alcohol intake. This is strong support for the substitution hypothesis. It implies that individuals, at least individuals who are regular consumers of alcohol and marijuana, are chasing a particular feeling, and that it doesn't matter much whether that feeling comes from the pot or from the booze. Which means that we might need to start thinking about marijuana as a harm reduction strategy to reduce alcohol intake. I know it sounds like we're trading one societal ill for another here, but let's be honest, despite the fact that one of these drugs is legal and one is only quasi-legal in most states, from a public health perspective, it's pretty clear which one is safer. Of course, there are caveats here. The people in this study were already drinkers and marijuana users. We have no idea whether there would be similar alcohol-reducing effects in people who don't smoke marijuana or with other forms of THC. Still, alcohol consumption has been declining in this country since marijuana legalization. That is very much correlation. But given the findings of this study, maybe there's something causal underneath. For Medscape, I'm Perry Wilson.